I'm reading from chapters 10 and 11 of this novel that Sandra has so beautifully introduced. The first 150 pages are my creative thesis completed in pursuit of this long-awaited Solstice MFA in fiction. I want to pause for a moment and thank my friends and family who are here. I promise you, I will not make you sit through my earning another degree after this one. This is the culmination. It's the degree I really always wanted. And I am so grateful for my whole Solstice community, for Meg and Quentin and the incredible work that they put in to make Solstice the experience it is for all of us. To actually even to this crazy pandemic, because it aligned the graduation dates for Megan and Ellen, who have become my sisters in fiction in so many ways. And I am just beyond grateful to my mentors, to Sandra and to the amazing Laurent Bosselar, and to the incredible Steve Huff, and to the so insightful Venice Berry, who have helped me to grow and to shape my novel and to hopefully become a true craftsperson. As a rating system warning, the selection I am reading contains scenes of war and graphic violence, along with language which may not be deemed appropriate for children. The road curved sharply, then broke out from the towering sequoias. Spread out on either side of the road was tall grass, the tips honey-colored in the pale afternoon sun. The scenery along the stretch of two-lane road that connected Interstate 5 to US 101 on the California coast was beautiful, but Callum didn't notice it. Instead, he fought the claustrophobia caused by the narrow road, the mountain passes, the looming trees. He turned off the radio. The music was jarring, discordant. He tried to focus on the road. His heartbeat accelerated, and the blood thrummed in his ears. He couldn't stop remembering. He kept his eyes on the highway, but it was as though that dusty Afghani road and the jagged mountains that loomed over it overlaid his vision. He focused on his hands on the steering wheel, and he reminded himself that he was driving a semi-truck in California. He was not in that broken-down Humvee in Afghanistan. He focused on the blacktop road, which was not dusty. The trees that pressed in on him were not the cliff faces of Afghanistan. He was in the U.S. He was driving a truck. But still he heard the voices, his own and those of his men, echoing in his head. He was in the cab of his truck, but he was in the Humvee, then and now and always. "Jeffers, any movement up there?" He directed his question into his radio. "No, sir. You want me to radio again and see if they've got it fixed?" He had put Jeffers and Waller on guard. They were green and needed to get their jumpiness in hand. "Negative," Callum said. He didn't bother to explain the stupidity of trying to hurry the mechanic who would arrive when he arrived. "I've got to take a piss." Gonzalez squirmed in his seat uncomfortably. "Come on, Sarge. It'll take just 5 seconds. "Hold it." He handed Gonzalez an empty water bottle. "Or piss in this. But you aren't going out there." Callum whipped the words at the PFC. They were younger and more useless with every tour. Jeffers radioed him. "We've got movement here, Sarge." Callum jerked his attention back to the front, looking out the bulletproof glass. An old man approached them, moving slowly. Waller shouted, "Hands! Show me your fucking hands!" Callum shook his head, hearing Waller's voice crack in panic. The old man smiled, gaps from missing teeth making him appear benign. "Hold your fire," Callum yelled. He jumped out of the Humvee, the back of his neck prickling. He looked for moving shapes behind the rocks that reared up against a sky white with heat. He took in the dusty feet and frayed clothes as the old man demonstrated that he carried only water. The old man took a step, and Waller cried out again, "Show me your hand, you fucker!" Seeing the tension in the soldiers, the old man smiled again, showing that he carried no hidden bombs. "Hold your fire, I said," Callum commanded Waller. "He is showing you his hands, dipshit." There would be no end to the grief if they killed an unarmed senior citizen. The water bearer drew nearer, speaking to them. "Get out here, Arif," Callum yelled. The interpreter inched from the Humvee, eyes darting about. "What's he want?" Callum asked. Arif called out to the man, then listened to the reply. Callum scanned the rocks again, trying to see through the dust and heat. His skin crawled. The Humvees might have been nothing more than tin cans sitting on a fence. "He says he's a goat herder," the Terp reported. "He was up the mountain and saw us. He left the goats with his boys so he could bring us water. He thought we must be thirsty." "Tell him thanks, but we've got water," Callum said. Something glinted on the edge of his line of sight. He jerked his head upward, scanning the rough cliffs above. The stuttering blast of AK-47 fire ripped through Arif's translation. The old man was the first to go, his body jerking, lifted in the air with the bullet's force. A scream ricocheted between the cliff faces. Blood from the ragged body of the goat herder seeped into the dirt. Arif flung himself back in the Humvee. Jeffers returned fire, sending bullets ricocheting off the cliff faces. Waller was slumped against the front bumper. Callum grabbed Waller's arm in one hand, Waller's dropped rifle in the other, and dragged him to the Humvee door. Bullets slammed the dirt, bounced off the Humvee's metal, sprayed a web of lines across the bulletproof windshield. "Jeffers, take cover!" He shoved Waller into the Humvee. Gonzalez yanked the slack body up and into the roaring of profanity and the rank smell of fear. Sergeant Zeke!" Jeffers' voice was hysterical as he flailed toward Callum. "Jeffers, get your ass in here!" He grabbed Jeffers and shoved him in the Humvee, pushed in after him, slammed the door. "Waller! Damn it, Waller!" He shook Waller's body, but Waller's eyes were blank. The Humvee stank of blood and urine. Outside, chunks of rock flew from the cliff faces, and bullets peppered the air. All of eternity was reverberating sound and blood. Static punctuated the chatter from the radio. Callum raised his voice just enough to get the attention of his men. "Don't move. Just hang tough. Just don't move." His squad hunkered down at his words. The men were terrified. Most were fresh from home, in it for the first time. Waller, their first lost brother. Chopper blades throbbed in the air, the Apache's guns entering the fray. Then silence. The radio crackled. Arif turned to Gonzalez. "You pissed yourself, man," he said. Gonzalez squirmed, and then his face lit up. "You pissed yourself too, pendejo!" The men howled with laughter, but not Waller, whose staring eyes needed to be shut. The remembered events ended. Do not relive that memory. Do not relive that memory. You are here. You are now. Driving to California. You are not over there. Not anymore. He drove out of the deep shadows of the redwoods and into the bright sunlight of a meadow. On either side of the truck, the golden grass rippled in the breeze. Ahead of him, at the other end of the meadow, a car emerged from the shadows. Its windshield flashed in the sunlight. The car swerved as it came toward him, first toward the meadow and then across the double yellow lines. As it crossed into his lane, he saw it was a convertible. Time seemed to freeze. He tried to calculate his next move, to determine what the physics of the situation demanded. He jerked at the wheel, braked hard, and felt the big rig rock as the right wheel sunk into the soft ground of the meadow. The trailer fishtailed, swinging across the width of the highway, and the grinding squeal of tires and metal on metal filled the air. The jarring impact rocked the rig as though a bomb had exploded. It seemed sure to tip over. The truck shuddered to a stop. Callum listened for other sounds. When one bomb exploded, sometimes another followed. Silence. He peered out the window and saw nothing but grass and trees. Listening for gunfire, he eased himself from the cab. Glittering glass crunched under his feet, and he crouched to make himself a smaller target as he ran toward the destruction. A vehicle was yards away. A car. Convertible. He shook his head. Something was wrong. Gore was splattered across the hood of the car. The driver's body was halfway through the windshield, and the top of his head had been sheared off by the truck's undercarriage. The air was freighted with the smell of burnt rubber, coolant from the car's crushed radiator, and the coppery stench of blood. "Find the wounded," Callum muttered. He began scanning the roadside. Dimly, he heard the screech of brakes, a man's voice shouting something. His blood roared in his ears. A shoe was on the side of the road, red, the Chuck Taylor star surrounded in gleaming white. Not issue. Civilian. He stepped into the tall grass. A second body was sprawled 2 feet away from the roadway, the neck twisted at an odd angle, blank eyes turned to heaven. The shouting again. He looked up to see 3 men advancing, the sun behind them. He couldn't make out their faces, but they looked unarmed. No Kalashnikovs, at least. He put himself between the body and the men. "Halt! Drop your weapon!" he commanded, first in English, then in Pashto, then Farsi. He felt for his own weapon. Why was he unarmed? He patted himself. Not even his Beretta. If the men were enemies, but unarmed, it would be hand-to-hand combat. He took a steadying breath and watched them. He needed the rest of his squad for backup. Were any alive? Was he the only one who had survived the explosion? The men drew back, conferred amongst themselves, and waited, watching him. He held a defensive stance, wary, marking the movements of the men, making sure they didn't circle around him. After some time, sirens wailed. Then men with uniforms arrived and talked to the 3 men before one approached him. Callum repeated his commands in all 3 languages. "Stand down, soldier. You've done great by that man. His mama couldn't have wished for a stronger guard for her boy, but you've got to let the medics get to him now." The man who spoke wore a tan uniform, and Callum couldn't place the branch it belonged to, but he spoke clear, unaccented English. He was clean-shaven with a blonde crew cut. Not a hostile, he decided, and he dropped his defensive stance. Reinforcements had arrived. He remained watchful while he stepped away from the body. "Bring in the paramedics," the CO called out. A group of paramedics rushed down the embankment, 2 of them approaching Callum. "I'm fine. Help Waller. He's bad off," he growled. "Do you know where you are?" the tallest paramedic asked. "Why don't you know our location?" Callum shot back, shifting back into a defensive stance. The paramedics exchanged a glance. "What day is it today?" "Bring a body bag," called out a paramedic by Waller. Another man came around the big truck, pushing a stretcher with an empty body bag laying on top of it. Callum watched as Waller's body was lifted into the body bag. The bag was zipped, and the bundle was lifted onto the stretcher. A voice came to his ears. "No, no, 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 no." From the end of a tunnel, he heard someone say, "He might be in a fugue state." "Yeah, acts like he's a vet." "Yeah, the Arabic stuff." "It was Farsi and Pashto. I was over there for 6 years." "Whatever." And the whole time he heard the voice, his own voice, repeating the word no over and over and over again. He was sitting on the blacktop, knees drawn up, arms over his head. How had he gotten there? He couldn't stop. No, 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 no. Thank you.